Do. Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes.
And I guess the next presumption, I won't even ask this question, is consequently that committee assessment, or that community assessment, was unanimous and is not a piece of fake news or evidence of some other individual or nation state other than Russia. So I appreciate that again for the record. I have to get you on the record as well in this. As long as you are acting FBI director, do you commit to informing this committee of any effort to interfere with the FBI's ongoing investigation into links between Russia and the Trump campaign?
I absolutely do.
Thank you so much for that. I think in light of what's happened in the last 48 hours, it's critically important that we have that assurance, and I hope you'll relay, at least from me, to the extraordinary people who work at the FBI, that this committee supports them, supports their efforts, supports their professionalism, and supports their independence.
I will, sir. Thank you.
In light of the fact that we just saw French elections where it felt like deja vu all over again in terms of the release of a series of emails against Mr. Macron days before the election, and the fact that this committee continues to investigate the type of tactics that Russia has used, where do we stand as a country in terms of preparation to make sure this doesn't happen again in 2018 and 2020? Where have we moved in terms of collaboration with state voter files, in terms of working more with the tech community, particularly the platform entities, in terms of how we can better assure real news versus fake news? Is there some general sense, Director Coates, I know you've only been in the job for a short period of time, of how we're going to have a strategic effort? Because while it was Russia in 2016, other nation states could launch similar type assaults.
Well, we will continue to use all the assets that we have in terms of collection and analysis relative to what the influence has been and potentially could be in future. The Russians have spread this across the globe. Interestingly enough, I met with the Prime Minister of Montenegro, the latest nation to join NATO, the number 29th nation. What was the main topic? Russian interference in their political system. And so it sweeps across Europe and other places. It's clear, though, the Russians have upped their game using social media and other opportunities that we have in ways we haven't seen before. So it's a great threat to our democratic process. And our job here is to provide the best intelligence we can to the policymakers as they develop a strategy in terms of how to best our response to this.
Well, one of the things I'm concerned about is we've all expressed this concern, but since this doesn't fall neatly into any particular agency's jurisdiction, who's taking the point on interacting with the platform companies, a la the Google, Facebook, and Twitters? Who's taking the point in terms of interacting, DHS, I imagine, in terms of state boards of election? How are we trying to ensure that our systems are more secure? And if we could get a brief answer on that, because I have one last question.
Well, I think obviously our office tasks and takes the point, but there's contribution from agencies across the IC. We will might ask Director Pompeo to address that, and others might want to address that also. But each of the agencies, to the extent that they can, and have the capacity, whether it's NSA through SIGINT, whether it's CIA through HUMIT or other sources, will provide information to us that we want to use as a basis to provide to our policymakers. Relative to a grand strategy, I am not aware right now of any. I think we're still assessing the impact. We have not put a grand strategy together, which would not be our purview. We would provide the basis of intelligence that would then be the foundation for what that strategy would be.
Well, my hope would be that we need to be proactive in this. We don't want to be sitting here kind of looking back at it after a 2018 election cycle. Last question, very briefly. Admiral Rogers, do you have any doubt that the Russians were behind the intervention in the French elections?
Let me phrase it this way. We are aware of some Russian activity directed against the French election process. As I previously said before Congress earlier this week, we in fact reached out to our French counterparts to say, we have become aware of this activity. We want to make you aware. What are you seeing? I'm not in a position to have looked at the breadth of the French infrastructure, so I'm not really in a position to make a whole simple declaratory statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCabe, can you, without going to the specific of any individual investigation, I think the American people want to know, has the dismissal of Mr. Comey in any way impeded, interrupted, stopped, or negatively impacted any of the work, any investigation, or any ongoing projects at the Federal Bureau of Investigations?
As you know, Senator, the work of the men and women of the FBI continues despite any changes in circumstance, any decisions. So there has been no effort to impede our investigation to date. Right. Simply put, sir, you cannot stop the men and women of the FBI from doing the right thing, protecting the American people, and upholding the Constitution.
And this is for all the members of the committee, as has been widely reported. People know this. Kaspersky Lab software is used by not hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans. To each of our witnesses, I would just ask, would any of you be comfortable with the Kaspersky Lab software on your computers?
A resounding no for me.
No.
No, Senator.
No, sir.
No, Senator. No, sir.
On the Director Pompeo, on the Venezuela, which was mentioned in Director Coates' statements, as all of you are probably well aware, armed civilian groups, or colectivos, these militias in the street, have been armed by the regime for the purpose of defending, for lack of a better term, the regime from protesters. We all are aware of the Maduro regime's cozy relationship with Hezbollah, with the FARC, which is a designated terrorist organization, and links to narco-trafficking. Among the weapons in the stockpile of the military in Venezuela are Igla-S, the basically Russian variant of our Stinger missiles. Director Pompeo, if you could comment on the risk that I believe exists that as these groups become more desperate, potentially even operate at some point outside the control of the Maduro regime, they're running around in the streets, also in search of money and food, and anything else that they want to get their hands on, the threat of any advanced weaponry, such as what I've just mentioned, being sold or transferred to the FARC, a terrorist organization, sold to drug cartels in Mexico potentially, or even sold to terrorist organizations on the black market. Is that a real threat? Is that something we should be cognizant of?
Senator, it is a real threat. As we have all seen, the situation in Venezuela continues to deteriorate. Maduro gets more desperate by the hour. The risk of these colectivos acting in a way that is not under his control increases as time goes on as well. In a classified setting, I'm happy to share with you a little bit more about the details of what we know. We have not seen any of those major arms transfers take place. We don't have any evidence that those have taken place to date, but those stockpiles exist not only in the Maduro regime, but other places as well. There are plenty of weapons running around in Venezuela, and this risk is incredibly real and serious, and ultimately a threat to South America and Central America, in addition to just Venezuela.
Staying in the Western Hemisphere for a moment, and this potentially results of Director McCabe, but certainly you, Director Pompeo, I continue to be concerned about the potential, and I believe is the reality, of a concerted effort on the part of the Cuban government to recruit and unwittingly enlist Americans, business executives, and other even local and state political leaders in an effort to have them influence U.S. policymaking on Cuba, and particularly the lifting of the embargo. Would this be a tactic consistent with what we have seen in the past from other nation states, including the regime in Cuba?
I'll let Mr. McCabe make a comment as well, but yes, of course. Frankly, this is consistent with what we, right? This is the attempt to interfere in the United States is not limited to Russia. Cubans have deep ties. It is in their deepest tradition to take American visitors and do their best to influence them in a way that isn't adverse to U.S. interests.
Yes, sir. Fully agree. We share your concerns about that issue.
And my final question is, on all this focus on Russia and what's happened in the past, is it the opinion of all of you, or those of you certainly all have insight on this, that even as we focus on 2016 and the efforts leading up to that election, efforts to influence policymaking here in the United States vis-a-vis the Russian interests are ongoing, that the Russians continue to use active measures, even at this moment, even on this day, to try, through the use of multiple different ways, to influence the political debate and the decisions made in American politics, particularly as they pertain to Russia's interests around the world. In essence, these active measures is an ongoing threat, not simply something that happened in the past.
Yes, sir, that's right.
Senator, it's right. In some sense, though, we have to put in context. This has been going on for a long time. There's nothing new. Only the cost has been lessened, the cost of doing it.
I would just add that the use of cyber and social media significantly increased the impact and the capabilities that Russia. Obviously, this has been done for years and years, even decades, but the ability they have to use the interconnectedness and all that provides that didn't provide before, they've literally upped their game to the point where it's having a significant impact.
From my perspective, I would just highlight cyber is enabling them to access information in massive quantities that weren't quite attainable to the same level previously. And that's just another tool in their attempt to acquire information, misuse of that information, manipulation, outright lies, inaccuracies at times, but in other times actually dumping raw data, which is what we also saw during this last presidential election cycle for us.
Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Where there's obviously more than one threat to our country, I would argue that the greatest danger to the United States is North Korea. And I'm one of those who have been very worried and trying to follow this as close as possible. In the statement for the record, you state, and I quote, "North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile programs will continue to pose a serious threat to U.S. interests and to the security environment in East Asia in 2017. You go on to state Pyongyang is committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that is capable of posing a direct threat to the United States. These assessments, combined with North Korea's behavior, recent ballistic missile launches, and proximity to U.S. forces and allies in Asia, is deeply concerning. For the purpose of this open hearing, could each of you express the threat posed by North Korea in this public setting, and then address, most importantly, some of the specific actions we're taking as a nation? And some of it you may want to do in a closed hearing later.
I think we could get into a greater detail in the closed hearing, but it's clear that we have assessed this as a very significant, potentially existential threat to the United States that has to be addressed. Where there's been considerable discussion among the policymakers with our providing intelligence with the administration relative to steps moving forward. General Mattis has taken a major role in this, as well as our Secretary of State and others. The interaction with the Chinese of late, we think can play a significant role in terms of how we deal with this. We have dedicated a very significant amount of our intelligence resources to the issue of North Korea, and I think we look forward to going deeper into all of
Well,
that.
let me ask this.
Classified session.
Is it possible in this hearing to estimate when they will have an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of taking a nuclear warhead?
I think it would be best if we save that for those kind of details for the closed session.
Can you say in this session how effective China has been in stopping some of the testing?
Senator Feinstein, let me try and answer that as best I can. I actually just returned from Korea. I was there last week. I had a chance to be with our great soldiers, General Brooks and his team, as well as the great soldiers of the Republic of Korea Army who are on the front lines there. They're doing amazing work in a difficult condition. With respect to the Chinese, they have made efforts in a way that they have not made before in an effort to close down the trade that they have and putting pressure, diplomatic pressure as well, on the North Koreans. The intelligence would suggest that we're going to need more to shake free this terribly challenging problem. And that they could do more, and they have the capacity to do more as well.
Could you be specific? It's have they entirely stopped coal? To what degree have they reduced it? How about oil and other commodities?
I'd prefer to defer the details of that to the classified setting, but there have been restrictions on coal that have been significant.
Is there any other comment?
If I could, Senator, North Korea has declared its intent. It said it publicly. It uses propaganda images that shows their intent to develop intercontinental missiles, nuclear armed. What we've not seen them do is do a complete end-to-end test of an ICBM with a nuclear device. In the closed session, we can talk about how close they might be to doing that. But they're certainly on parallel paths, nuclear device, processing enough fissile material for nuclear warheads, and developing a wide range of missile technology, short, intermediate, long-range missile technology. So they're going to put those two together at some point, but we have not seen them do that, test it end-to-end. Missile launch, intercontinental range, miniaturization, and survival of a reentry vehicle. But they're on that path, and they're committed to doing it.
I just add, Senator, on top of General Stewart's comments, that they are in a race. He's pushing very hard on the accelerator here. This whole panel is well aware of that, and we are doing everything in our power, and we can give you the details enclosed to make sure that we give you and our customers the advantage to win that race.
If I might just say, Mr. Cardillo, you've given us very good information, very solid information. It is much appreciated. I think, it is time for the American people to begin to understand that, as the director said, we do in fact have an existential threat in the Pacific Ocean, and we need to come to grips with it.
Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Coates, let me join everybody else and welcome you back to the committee, this time on the other side of the hearing table, but please, along with others, you take this responsibility. To my understanding, I want to talk just a little bit about the two executive orders on vetting that the president has been challenged on in court. My understanding is you're, as the DNI, involved in that vetting, in that process. Is that right? The screening process, is that something that reports up through you?
You're talking about the classification
Yes.
process?
Well, I'm talking about the extreme vetting where the president's issued. The first executive order was January the 27th, where the president's order said that we'd suspend refugee admissions from certain countries for 90 days pending a review. There's also 120 days mentioned in that order. And since we're beyond 90 days and approaching 120 days, my real question is, are we, in spite of what's happening outside of the organization, are we continuing to pursue that timeline, and are we about to get to the 120 days of having that review period behind us?
I would like to take that question and get back to you with the specifics relative to the days away, what has been done to this particular date, and are we on target? Obviously, this is going forward. I don't have the details in front of me right now, but I'd be happy to get that information for you.
Good. I'd be interested in that. I'd be very concerned, frankly, if we're now over 100, close to 120 days into that time frame, to find out that 120 days didn't get the job done because we were waiting to figure out how the order could be properly enforced, and so I'd be very interested in that. On the cyber front, Director Cardillo. I know, among other things, your organization has conducted what you've called hackathons, or at least it's been called hackathons. What has that done in terms of bringing other people into the discussion of how we protect ourselves better from these cyber attacks?
Sure, thank you, Senator. So we're quite proud at NGA of our history of support to the community and to you, but through predominantly historically closed systems, government-owned systems, et cetera. As the committee's already discussed and the panel's responded clearly, the high-tech reality of our world, the interconnectedness of the internet, et cetera. So what we're trying to do is take that historic success of our expertise and our experience and then engage with that community in a way that we can better leverage our data in a way to inform and warn you. And so I'm trying to tap into the agility and the innovation of that community. We use these hackathons to put out challenge questions in which we can engage with industry and academia in a way that'll enable us to do our job better.
Let me ask one more question of you. We had a witness before this committee on March the 30th in an open hearing, Clint Watts, who observed that he said, quote, "The intelligence community is very biased against open source information." That ends his quote. May come to you on that too, Director Pompeo, but in terms of geospatial, what are you doing there with open source information?
We're engaging. As Admiral Rogers mentioned, though, there's an upside to this connectedness and the fact that the commercial market and the commercial imagery market is getting into a business that was prior a government-only entity. Has great advantage, and we seek to build on that and take advantage of those developments. We also need to go in eyes wide open and realize that there is a risk. So I don't have a bias. I have an awareness and appreciation for this open development and innovation, and my commitment is to smartly engage with it to make sure that we use the best of it while we're aware that there is a risk as we do so.
Director Pompeo, do you think that was a fair criticism that the intelligence community is biased against using open source information?
So well, I think historically that may well have been true. I don't think that's the case today. We have an enormous open source enterprise that does its best to stay up with world-class in information management, get information that is not stolen secrets, but open source information to the right place at the right time to help inform the intelligence that we provide to you and to our other customers. So today I would say that statement is inaccurate.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chairman.
In the corner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me highlight one issue and then ask a question, Director Coates, about another issue. I'd invite comment from anyone who has something they want to offer. I've been increasingly concerned about foreign governments hiring lobbyists here in Washington and, unbeknownst to members of Congress, actually lobbying Congress to enact policies which may be contrary to the best interests of the American people. Of course, the Foreign Agent Registration Act provides some level of transparency to that, but I just highlight that issue, and we can come back to it at a later time, because I want to ask you about another topic as well. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, provides a very important role in determining whether there are technology transfers from the United States to foreign governments. And I'm happy to see, Director Coates, your comments on page 4 of your written statement, specifically regarding China's increasing effort to use investment as a way to improve its technological capabilities. China, we've seen, continues to use an aggressive campaign to vacuum up advanced U.S. technology, however and whenever it can, whether stealing it through cyber or buying it in the open market. Do you feel like the current CFIUS process adequately protects against this threat vector, and are all elements of the U.S. government cognizant of these vulnerabilities?
I can't speak to how many agents of the U.S. government are as cognizant as perhaps we should be, but I certainly think that given China's aggressive approach relative to information gathering and all the things that you mentioned merits a review of CFIUS in terms of whether or not it needs to have some changes or innovations to address the aggressive